A very good evening to one and all present, and welcome to a brand new episode of View TV by Vijay Bhumi. This is your host, Kritika Padode Bhandari. This is a series that we bring to you on a weekly basis called Express with Ease Students Speak, a very unique series where we are joined by students as panelists who use this platform to air their opinions and perspective on the various contemporary issues. Today, we're going to be talking about a rather important event that has happened in the recent past in our country. We all have been listening about it on the news channels. We have been reading about it online. We've been reading about it in newspapers, the West Bengal elections. And oh boy, what an election it has been. It has totally changed the dynamics of politics in the West Bengal region. I mean, suddenly during the results, we realized that while Trinamool Congress won, the BJP ended up getting a large share of votes. And strangely enough, the left, which has been holding a prominent place in West Bengal for so many years, was totally kicked out and eliminated from the picture along with the Congress. So today, with the students, we are going to be analyzing that what were the political strategies that they saw that were deployed by the various political leaders and the parties during this election. What according to them they thought worked. What did they think of the results? What did they think of the outcome? Also, this election's been very unique and novel for West Bengal because suddenly we saw a shift in the politics that is usually, on display in West Bengal. Suddenly, there was a change in the nature of campaigning that one witnessed in the state. So we're going to be unpacking this and a lot more in this episode with our students today. I'm joined with a lovely panel of three students from three different schools. Today, I'm joined by Anirudh Dattagupta from the Newton School. I'm joined by Bhaskar Agarwal from Birla High School. And I'm joined by Swaham Chakrabarti from Shri Shri Academy. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Super. So I really hope that all my audience members are also doing well and keeping safe. Thank you so much, guys. It's because of the encouragement that we get from all of you that we are motivated to bring content to you on a weekly basis. Like I had announced earlier, we have some very exciting giveaways lined up for the best questions of this episode. So make sure you're asking us a lot of questions because we would love to include it as a part of our conversation with our student panelists today. So without further ado, let's jump right into the session. I'm sure, our panelists are also waiting to share a lot of their thoughts with us on the bygone election in West Bengal. So let's just first start with, what was your initial reaction, to the results of the elections and to, the kind of campaigning and the political strategies that we witnessed in West Bengal. So if I may first start with Swaham, if you can just share, what were your initial reactions and thoughts?
I guess it wasn't too surprising, the results. There was, of course, a thought going around all around West Bengal that BJP might win, but there was also this very implacable thought that at last TMC will come to power. And I do not think I was very much surprised with the results of the elections. That would be my initial reaction, indeed.
Super. So while Swaham wasn't actually surprised with the fact that TMC would come to power, Anirudh, would you agree with him? What was going on in your mind? What was the chatter that you were hearing from your peer group when you guys were discussing the election? What did you think about the election?
Right. So to start off, I definitely agree with Soham on the point that there was a little controversy going around on who is going to win the election. There was never, according to me at least, there wasn't ever a point where one could certainly say that, oh, right now at this point, looking at the situation, either TMC or BJP will win. However, there were certain, of course, once we come to what strategies were deployed, there were certain strategies which I feel led TMC to have an upper hand over the BJP. But once we analyze these strategies and once we understand what all the BJP did as compared to the TMC, we see a clear reason why the TMC won over the BJP.
All right. So I must say, Bhaskar, two of your panelists are pretty much on the same page. Do you concur with them or do you disagree with them? What was your take back from this election?
Well, as a student, my initial reaction was wow. The results which I witnessed had taken me aback. To some extent, everyone might have thought, like the other panelists here, what the outcome would be, but the margin of 213 seats and 48% votes was unexpected. The fact that all the exit polls, opinion polls had failed to predict the results shows the incalculable nature of this election. As to speak about the strategies, that too was newfound. The whole polling process was divided into 8 phases, whereas Tamil Nadu, having around the same number of constituencies, had only one phase. Central forces too were there in large numbers. Also, another factor which keeps me striking as a student, that during this pandemic, was it necessary to hold this election? Being a student, I saw the board exams being postponed. So why couldn't the elections be postponed by at least a month or two? This question remains unanswered till date.
I think that's a very good question that you have raised. And, I actually want to take this to my other two panelists as well to see what do they feel about it, it's absolutely right. I mean, students are in the lurch because, clearly board exams have been postponed. There is no date that has been given to the competitive examinations. We are right in the middle of the, second wave of the pandemic, just grim news everywhere. So what did you think? Do you think it was actually a good idea for us to have elections at this point in West Bengal? Because there was some chatter about the fact also that, there were a lot of cases of COVID-19 that were there in West Bengal, but there was data that was, being, suppressed at that point of time since, they were going into elections. So can we start with you, Anirudh? What do you think? Was there really a need for us at this point of time to have this gigantic exercise of going into an election in the state?
Right. So to answer this question, we have to understand one premise. Holding an election is essential for a democracy. That is what defines a democracy, right? Now, with that being said, an election during a pandemic, in my opinion, wasn't the best and the wisest of ideas. Clearly, because as of today, we are recording over 4,000 cases of COVID, 4 lakh cases. 4 lakh cases of COVID per day, which in itself is such a big number that that an election would have only acted as a catalyst to increase that number and increase the number of COVID cases. So according to me, no, absolutely, it wasn't necessary. We could have pushed back the elections a couple of weeks. But another thing that we have to consider is that COVID is here to stay, right? COVID isn't going next month or in August or in September, right? COVID is here to stay. So we have to eventually plan to learn to live with it. But having the election at a stage where the cases are peaking and at a stage where the second wave has hit India so badly, I don't think it was the wisest of decisions by the Election Commission.
I think I echo your sentiment there because, obviously, having an election also means that there's a lot of campaigning, there's a lot of, rallies, etc., that are an inevitable part of it, which obviously attract large populations. And as we saw in West Bengal, there were people that were thronging at each of these rallies. So definitely, yes, I echo the sentiment that you have shared. So what about you, Swam? Do you agree with two of your co-panelists?
About that point which Mr. Aniruddha took up about that COVID pandemic is here to stay. And so at one point of time, we've got to conduct the elections. What I really want to focus upon is that in the history of elections in India, you've never got an election which had so many phases. Was that really necessary? And we've got the Madras High Court and the Calcutta High Court going against the Election Commission. The Madras High Court charged them of murder, not in words, but verbally. And indeed, the Election Commission took that case to the Supreme Court. But then the Supreme Court said that no, the media can report upon these things. So, really, that the Election Commission, it first of all had so many phases for this particular one, and then again, it allowed election campaigning to go on nearly unhindered. And this, especially if I may talk for a little more, I think the BJP losing, the BJP has much more resources than TMC. I think we would all agree to that. Being this power at the center, it has much more resources. However, I think those very resources were detrimental to BJP coming in here. because you've got our Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah coming in here so many times, neglecting the situation in what was happening in Delhi and UP. Well, the Prime Minister is supposedly to look after the whole of India, is supposedly responsible to all the people of India, and thus I do think that there was a general discontent among the people that how could the Prime Minister himself be so irresponsible. He was faced with such great odds. We've never seen quite a pandemic situation like this in independent India, and he's coming here and campaigning and allowing people to gather together in huge numbers without any kind of COVID protocols.
I think definitely, Swaham, there, the points that you have made have, have actually been shared by a lot of people who have criticized the election on similar grounds that, because of the rising number of COVID cases, probably it was wiser for the authorities to look into that rather than focus on this election, this campaigning, etc. So I think a lot of people would, actually unanimously would agree with the three of you here that, probably it wasn't the best idea to have the elections at this point of time, because clearly there was a bigger worry that, the country needed attending to.
And
Now,
the pandemic really, in a way, it showed with the PM and our Home Minister coming in here so often, it showed a form of desperation. And I do think a political party showing desperation is very much detrimental to its stature and its prestige. You've got because it showed that the local leaders here, they were not being able to take on the masses, and they've got to invite the big players from the center, and so
right.
It showed a form of desperation, and showing a form of desperation for a powerful political party is, it's harmful for its prestige.
Correct. Point very well taken. So let's come back to the election. And I would like to know, so, a lot of political commentators, post the election, there were a lot of editorial pieces that were written where a lot of them wrote that, the nature of politics in West Bengal has been changed forever after this election. After the kind of campaigning they saw, after the kind of, speeches that were made by the various, candidates, there was definitely, they felt a tectonic shift in the nature of politics that, West Bengal had witnessed. So I would like to hear from you guys. If we can first start with Bhaskar, do you agree with that opinion that was, echoed by a lot of political commentators?
Well, ma'am, saying that politics has changed forever might be wrong, because politics itself is a thing which is very dynamic. It keeps changing. Today, we see a right-wing party rising in Bengal, which had no identity earlier, and its opposition coming to Novanno with a rise in 3% of its vote share. Few years ago, we had the left front ruling over Bengal for 35 years, securing at least 45% of votes and no less than 150 seats each and every time. So democracy itself is a cycle, it's a process. Change is in the very essence of democracy and its people, whose ideologies keep changing. So according to me, saying that it has changed forever might be wrong.
Fair enough. So point very well taken. Bhaskar feels that change is the only constant in life, and so in politics, and so it is but natural that things are evolving so in the political field. What about you, Anirudh? What did you think about it? Do you think there was something really, I think something that really shocked, you in terms of, the way the election was being conducted, the way the campaigning was happening, the way also how, a lot of the native parties of West Bengal were also trying to sort of, compete with the larger parties in terms of their strategies that were being deployed. What did you feel about it?
Right, ma'am. So to answer this question, I would first like everybody to acknowledge the fact that as of 2011, the BJP drew a blank with just 4.1% votes in the assembly polls. That had just improved to 3 seats, which is about 10.2% of votes in the 2016 polls. So the BJP was firmly on the margins till the last election, right? However, in this election, everything changed dramatically. The BJP built upon Modi's popularity to emerge as a main challenger to the TMC, winning about 18 of the 42 Lok Sabha seats and securing about 40.6% of the votes. Now, one thing is clear after this election: for politics of Hindutva is here to stay in the state of West Bengal. For some time now, political competition of the state will remain between TMC versus BJP, which in retrospect has been an unthinkable proposition. Which begs the question, what does BJP bring with itself that is capable of redefining West Bengal's politics? Bengal has a special place for the Hindutva imagination, for political, cultural, and intellectual, inter-religion, intra-religion reasons. But this has not translated over the decades into deep ideological and organizational penetration of the RSS in Bengal, or political strength in BJP. Hindutva has now established itself as an ideological factor in Bengal's politics. This has already redefined politics, visible in Mamata Banerjee's attempts to tone down her associations with the Muslims and play up her Hindu identity with her famous slogan Jai Shri Ram. Now, one thing is clear after all of this is that uh, the Hindu-Muslim part of the equation will never leave West Bengal. It will not. I'm sorry, will not leave West Bengal in the near future, especially after this election. Now that BJP, with its Hindu and Hindu mentality and Hindu ideology, is such a big factor in the state's politics.
I think that's a point very well made there. So Aniruddha, believes that it's basically because of the fact that the TMC also had to compete against the BJP, and the BJP's larger ideology being propagation of the Hindutva movement. So that has definitely acted as a catalyst and has completely evolved the nature of politics that one is seeing in the state of West Bengal. Swaham, would you agree with that? Do you think that that was the big change agent in this time's politics, that we saw that this was the kind of narrative that all the parties were sort of trying to eat into and make the most of?
Well, about the first thing, about the nature of politics, I don't believe that the nature of politics can change, because it's the play of power, and well, power. When you get power, things become quite predictable, I would say. But upon the what Aniruddha said about Hindutva, I've got. I think I really want to talk about identity politics here, and I think more than TMC, it's the people of Bengal that really matter here in defeating BJP, more than the campaigning of TMC. Because what you've got, all right, BJP. BJP was not always like this. We would say that in recent years, the perception of BJP in Bengal is they are the bastion of Hindutva. Now, in a society, you see there are circles of power and there are circles of justice. In a circle of power, all those who are included are the elite, those who supposedly think that we are the ones who have power over certain population and over other things. And the circle of justice, well, it may extend beyond the circle of power. It's basically that whenever you look upon a person, you look upon that person as a human being, and that's where the circle of justice really comes in. Because if you do not look upon that person as a human being, or at least to some extent humanize them, you wouldn't have any sense of justice for that person. For justice to prevail, I think it's fundamental in our human behavior that you've got to humanize things. That's where the feeling of justice comes in. Now, what does this Hindutva of BJP propose? I would first of all want to say that it doesn't really hold much anything in common with actual philosophical Hinduism, because Hinduism is just a broad umbrella term that the British thought fit to impose upon all the varieties of cultures that were prevalent in India and had descended from the Indo-Aryans at that time. But Hindutva is a political stance. And what does Hindutva want? Hindutva wants the circle of power to comprise mostly and wholly only of Hindus. And let's say the circle of justice it can extend to other minorities, like let's say Parsis, Christians, and Sikhs, maybe all of them, but except Islamic people. The Islamic people are totally left out of the circles of justice and of power. Now, about Bengal, you see, Hindutva is a form of Hindu nationalism. I mean, if you can take Hindu to be certain very monolithic identity, then it's a form of Hindu nationalism. Bengal doesn't really have a form of nationalism, I would say. What Mamata Banerjee started talking about, the Boirogis, that they are the outsiders, well, it may have played some part, but it was just giving fire to the already feeling, to the prevalent feeling the people were having. Bengal doesn't have a form of nationalism because nationalism is very much detrimental to and to the others. Let's say the others, because nationalism is that you've got the us and you've got the others. Us are everything which represents the good in this world, and the others are the evil ones. They are non-human. We do not care about them. We should kill them. So what Bengal has, not nationalism but identity. Bengal has a certain identity. Now, even from, if we trace the history of Bengal over a long period of time, even from ancient times, let's say the common people of Bengal were never Aryanized in the same way that the people of the northern states were, because this was quite a secluded region during the, well, when Aryabhatta was present in the present region of UP. It only kind of affected the elites. And then again, we've got, let's say, the imperial Palas in Bengal. They were Buddhists. And after that, of course, in the medieval era, we get all these Muslim dynasties coming in Bengal, and we've got the Bengali Muslim Sultanate has quite a long history in Bengal. So, uh, first of all, the point to be made about Bengal, we can see that it's quite accepting. Over a long period of time, the culture here evolved in such a way as to accept other religions, not just Hinduism. You've got Islamic religion, then you've got the Buddhists, and you've got the Bengali culture accepts other forms of religion, and then again you get the British coming in, where was the center for most of the time in India, in Kolkata, and thus this was the place where the Indian Renaissance started, and it's called the Bengal Renaissance. With Bengal Renaissance, the people of Bengal started being introduced to Western ideas, and they became more westernized. And I think that trend of kind of, I would say indeed, there's a sort of pride. People still take a sort of pride that the Bengalis are the inheritors of the, let's say, the Western outlook on India, in a way, that the Bengalis like to see themselves in a way that since the British came here and since they stayed here, they are progressive, and they work for social justice, and they uphold the Western ideals of, let's say, democracy, liberty, and justice. So you've got this whole identity of Bengali here, the modern Bengali especially. Let's say it formed after eminent person like Raja Ram Mohan Roy. And against this, you pit a force which is Hindutva. Now, as I said, that the sentiments in the people were such that they didn't revert to nationalism, no, but they kept this identity of themselves, that it wasn't really that, no, Hindutva is bad, Hinduism is bad. Of course it's not, because, well, most Bengalis are Hindu, I would say, a major percentage. But Hindutva, as a political stance, goes against the very basics of the modern Bengali identity. And that's where I really think that BJP, the thought came upon many people in Bengal that BJP would not be able to come to power, because they lacked that deep ideological and cultural roots that the Bengali identity adheres to and prizes.
No, I think that's again a very good point that you made there, and it's lovely how you've kind of charted the entire path for us. And I think you're absolutely right, because a large section of the population of Bengal does feel that they cannot connect to the ideology that's propagated by the Bharatiya Janata Party. Because, like you explained, right? So there is a certain cultural root, there's a certain cultural heritage, that is attached to Bengal. So obviously, keeping that in mind, this kind of politics is probably something that does not sit well with the larger population, and that is where maybe it is, worth to think about that maybe this strategy completely bombed. So I think while I leave that at this, so we have made a lot of points on, how Hindutva came in, how that has been a part of this politics, We have Swam talking about, how this did not sit very well with the larger population of the state. So, which will bring me to this question that do we see that there was a new social alignment that was trying to be pitched in the state? Is there a new social alignment that has been created in the state? Because very sadly we are seeing, post the elections, we are seeing certain riots have taken place, violence has taken place in the state. So are we seeing new lines that are being created, new divides, new lines being created in society on the basis of various factors? If we can first start with Anirudh.
I'm sorry, ma'am, could you repeat your question? I didn't really understand it.
So, Anirudh, what I'd like to know from you is that do we see a new social alignment being created in Bengal? We are also seeing that, very sadly now there has been post-election, there's been violence. We've been talking, all of us have been chatting about the fact that, how Hindutva was trying to be plugged in this election. So obviously there was a lot of attempts that were made at dividing the society. So what do you think about it? How did this play out in Bengal, and what are you witnessing in the state right now?
Right, ma'am. So to understand this, we also have to understand one of the essential strategies which was employed by the TMC. This includes division of the people of West Bengal as we know it into two groups, who we like to call in Kolkata in the local language Bhadralok, Bodolok, or the higher society, and Chotolok, or the lower society. See, of course, there are people who want the BJP to come mainly because of their contempt towards Muslims, which is really, really heartbreaking. But the Bhadralok is also acutely fearful of the North Indian culture sweeping through Bengal and marginalizing the Bengali in its own land. And this is not something the so-called Chotolok will take kindly. Some Bhadralok feel that the Bengali identity with the same fervor that the French do to their identity. And it is here that Mamata Banerjee has scored over the BJP. Now look at these Vishwa Bangla storerooms that the government has promoted. These are essentially authentic handicrafts items from the stage, from saris to sculptures to knickknacks. But Mamata Banerjee and her team has named it Vishwa Bangla, which literally translates to Bengal in the world. This is a sharp contrast to the Hindu and Hindutva narrative of the BJP. Now, this is where essentially the TMC has divided the people of West Bengal into two groups: the Chotoloks who support the TMC because majority of this Chotolok population is Muslim, and the Bodoloks who are afraid that who clearly contempt the Muslims and who are afraid that the North Indian culture would sweep through West Bengal, who support the BJP. Now the BJP has entered the state politics by its initial success were in backward regions of North Bengal and North Bengal. It created a base by quoting Dalits and Adivasis, Hindu migrants from Bangladesh, and Hindi speakers in urban pockets. Since 2019, though, the BJP has expanded its net reach much beyond these sections. This time, it has gone into the heartland of rural South Bengal and has created space for itself among the Bengali middle class, or the Bhadralok, which is now a new social alignment among the Bhadralok. Especially those who speak directly to the idea of Hindutva, who have now moved their face from the CPM to the BJP. Now, what I'm essentially trying to say here is that the BJP, so essentially the West Bengal population is divided into Chotolok and Bodolok. The Bodolok, because they were supporting the communist CPM earlier, they now that the CPM no longer finds itself in a position of power, all their trust and all their vote has gone towards the BJP. So now essentially there are two parts in Bengal. One is the Bodolok, or the higher middle class society, which supports the BJP, and one is the majority choto log or the lower caste society, majority Muslims, which support the TMC. So this is how I think it has created a new social alignment in the minds of the different types of people in West Bengal.
Right. So clearly, what we are seeing here that there has been a reorganization of the entire sections that were there prevailing in the society for a very long time in West Bengal. So, and there's also been further fragmentation that has taken place in the existing structures as well. Swan, would you agree with that? That do you think that
I would not really agree with that. I would say there may be a socio-political change of alignment, but not really social change.
so
As
what is
in, well,
socio-political
what he
that you feel has changed?
but I would like to say something that Mr. Aniruddha here said that about well, say the Bhadralok supporting the CPM. You did say that, right? At one point.
Yes, yes, I did.
Hmm. So CPM's main popularity was with the Chotoloks, not the Bhadraloks, because the it only came about when Chief Minister Buddhadev he started calling more capitalists to Kolkata, but you wouldn't really get the the higher part of society supporting the CPM, because they started this movement called the Gherao movement, which allowed the laborers to, well, surround the let's say the owners of the enterprises without any police protection, and that was one of the reasons why capital started to flee from West Bengal. So I've got to refute that point, that the main support base of the CPM was the with the rural poor and the laborers, where of course the CPM, uh, why the rural poor and the laborers later turned to TMC. Well, of course it was that over the long reign, the people did become disgruntled. The people did become disgruntled. There was the land acquisition, and then there's the sudden change of the sudden reversal of policy. At first, they were all like, well, capitalism is bad. We don't want capitalists in West Bengal. And then when, well, the situation was dire, they had to call in the capitalists again, because otherwise the economy was just going down a slump. So that was one of the points. And well, about the social changes, well, looking at the elections, I would say that well, there is a yes, there is a sentiment among some of the Bengalis that the Islamic peoples are just too much right now. I would say that yes, there is, but as seen in the elections, it's not the view of the majority.
All right. So you have two different views here, Bhaskar, coming from your two panelists. So while Aniruddha felt that there was fragmentation in existing structures, Swaham, on the other hand, feels that there's more of a sort of socio-political divide on the lines of religion. There is some alienation, feeling of alienation that exists, where probably the majority community is feeling that the minority is growing too much in population and those kind of fears. So, which school of thought do you subscribe to, or do you come with a third, point of view to this table?
Well, ma'am, if we see about the term social alignment, it's a very broad term. I would only agree that West Bengal has witnessed a new social alignment if this social alignment means a political alignment. As mentioned, the ideologies and alignments of people keep changing. The election gave nothing to the left front, but a considerable rise to the right-wing party, achieving 38% of votes. So on this basis, we can say that a new social or political alignment is being created. Now, whether this will last or not would be a thing to witness. It's all in the process. But on the whole, as I was saying, the social alignment of people cannot be changed at all, because one cannot manipulate the beliefs of the society. There are certain morals, there are certain ethics of a society which cannot be manipulated. Radicalism also has a limit to it. After 55%, radicalism is not feasible. So social alignment is not at all possible in a society.
Point very well taken, Bhaskar. So Bhaskar feels that the fact that there is definitely a change in terms of the political landscape of the state today, because which we have seen in 38% of the vote share being given to the BJP. But he's also of the firm opinion that the large social fabric of the state, which finds its grounding in the values, the traditions, and the customs of the state, will remain unchanged. And obviously, this is subject to what time, subject to how we fare in the future. Now, I think no conversation about this election would be complete about a conversation about Mr. Prashant Kishore. And about how he and his bunch of youngsters who work in his team have been very instrumental in Didi winning the elections in West Bengal. In fact, I don't think I will be wrong when I say this, that, on the day that, the election results were out and, the various news channels were covering it, we saw, enough amount of footage also being given to Mr. Prashant Kishore, which just shows that what a critical role he played in the West Bengal, elections. So I would like to know from you guys that firstly, how did you view this entire scenario that I think unfolded for the first time, that, you have professional management companies that are now taking care of politics, and how they have now started, coming out in the open and playing a very prominent role in the politics of the state. So can we start with you first?
I think there was a subtle fear among the people that now politics will be kind of privatized, but I think it's an unfound one, because, well, let's say political strategists, it's not something new. It's just that now, instead of a member of the party, someone from outside is coming in, and you're paying that person money, and that person is doing the work for you. I don't really see much danger in it, I would say, because it could have been that any one of the party could have studied about political strategy and could have employed such means. The only difference is that the private organizations are doing this. Now, the thing is that I don't think it would lead to any form of, well, corporatocracy, because they, at last, they are not standing for the elections. It is the politicians who are, and the politicians are supposedly responsible to the people. And, well, if, let's say that these private organizations do get too powerful, I would say that they, in a way, already are. They are the ones who provide the funds for the parties. I would really say that the private organizations already are very much, in some places, in the they are kind of the advisors to the party in some cases, because they are the ones who's providing the money. And I don't think the politicians would really allow them to suddenly come into the public domain and let the people see how the whole thing's been going on, because then the people will start demanding reforms. And if the people start demanding reforms, if popular pressure is built too much, at some point the government's got to break and give it to them. The government can't just go on infinitely rejecting the people's wishes. And so, in a way, it is a more explicit form of political advice from the private part of from the private sector. But I wouldn't think that it would I don't think that it would get too explicit, that the politicians themselves and the private players too, they would want to keep themselves undercover a little, and wouldn't want to get too muddled up in the whole thing, because the politics is a thing which, yes, of course, it gives you a lot of profit, but it also comes with a huge amount of risk, which I'm not quite sure whether the private players are ready to take upon themselves. I think they would be rather happy at a laid back position where they know that, well, I've got no commitment. Rather, if this party wants my services, I can provide the service and I can take the money for myself, and that's profit.
Correct. So I think that's a point very well articulated there. So you are firmly of the opinion that they've always been a part of the picture. It's just that now